Dr. Ashok, our special guest for today. A very warm welcome to you, sir, on behalf of our team. Dr. M.V. Ashok has been instrumental in developing the St. John's Center for Children with Special Needs, a multidisciplinary center called Unit of Hope, and coordinates research and training here. Dr. Ashok has a MD from NIMHANS. He has been a visiting registrar in Liverpool, UK. He was also a consultant psychiatrist at the Sheffield Care Trust, UK, and senior clinical lecturer at the Academic Department of Psychiatry, University of Sheffield. In August 2019, Dr. Ashok launched Year Old Adhd, the Center for Advanced Research and Excellence in Autism and Developmental Disorders, with the help of generous donations from philanthropists. He continues to conduct ongoing studies with funds from WHO, ICMR, academic universities in USA and Canada. Dr. Ashok Mysore and his team at Year Old Adhd are working on many aspects of autism and developmental disorders. A key project includes understanding care models for young adults with such diagnoses. It is hoped that a new project being launched, working closely with youth with developmental disorders for extended period of time, would help evolve models of care for this group. Dr. Ashok enjoys learning from a variety of stakeholders, especially parents in this regard. Sir, we are looking forward to your guidance and support. Thank you for being with us today. Now, may I request Dr. Ashok to address our Parents Forum audience. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Rajan.
Thank you, sir.
It's definitely a very special moment for me because this is the kind of interaction Year Old Adhd has been wanting to have, and we hope that we can actually bounce out ideas today meeting, which can be the start of maybe thinking through many of these issues. And I mean, it's wonderful to know of organizations like Mitra and how they're actually working in this extremely difficult space. And we look forward to actually learning from these interactions, and we hope these interactions will continue for for many years to come. So I have a confession to make. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I don't want to appear very knowledgeable in this regard at all. So I must disappoint parents if they expect to go here with specific suggestions. I honestly, I mean, I'm sure there's so many things written up here and there, and in today's world, you can always access information from across the web, and information that's available everywhere. I mean, I really don't think there is a need to have this kind of forum to discuss it, because a lot of parents today can access this information, and many of you are associated with organizations from Mitra. I'm sure apart from sharing their own expertise, they can also definitely get you a lot of information from across the web and think about different models with you. Now, I personally don't know if when it comes to helping young adults, though the title says adolescent issues, I mean, let's talk about anybody between 15 and 30 years of age, probably some of them older. So I think the action for helping the groups in this area is going to come from models everywhere else. I think we need to evolve our own models. I mean, this is a matter of faith with us, and we believe that these kind of interactions. I'm really excited about today's interaction because I think we've been actually wanting to start these kind of interactions with parents and organizations working with the relatively old persons with developmental difficulties. So I think we need to really work together and develop models. I honestly don't, I'm not going to really be able to tell you this is exactly what needs to be done. There's a whole lot of questions that have been sent to me by the organizers very kindly. And I went through them. I mean, each of them, I mean, if it's a person sitting across the table in a clinical setting, we could probably have a great deal of discussion about their personal circumstances and think of something that can come about. But to say that for these kind of questions in a forum like this, we'll actually have ready-made answers which you all can carry home in a general sort of way, I think it would be very wrong to think that such knowledge exists actually. And I honestly think, therefore, I'm going to use this opportunity to get to know you all, and hopefully we'll have more and more and more interactions like this. I'm extremely confident that, especially a city like Bangalore, which has taken a lot of lead. I noticed Mrs. Matthias in that in the audience. I think the kind of initiative they took 40 or 50 years ago, 40 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, and how that has actually spawned so many students going on to start so many organizations, having a city which has taken a lead in actually trying to help, which has first begun with the youngsters, the early interventions, the struggles around that, and a whole lot of organizations are developing around that theme, and how in the last 8-10 years, there has been an increasing focus on these kind of issues, though I must really congratulate an organization like Mitra to have taken up this really hard area where there are no ready-made models, and you need to keep being creative and come out with things and keep the pace and the families engaged in the search actually, because many times they want ready solutions. So I think really heartfelt congratulations to Mitra. And I think we need to start having more and more of these discussions. I mean, that's honestly the summary of my talk. I mean, I got another 15 slides, but believe me, the summary is going to come back to this. Unlike the first few years of life, when parents are really keen on looking for specific diagnosis or the specific idea that can actually modify if somebody can intervene at that specific idea in a surgical sort of way. I think parents of persons with developmental delays, by the time the concerned index persons are 15, 20, 25 years of age, parents and families have faced very tough challenges. In many ways, they are toughened people, probably more tough than most other people in the society, but also very concerned too. I mean, there are lots of very generic questions, all of them share. And there are some bits that I have noticed about parents of children who are somewhat older. They're no longer seeking condition negating treatments. I mean, they are not saying, can you give something that this will go away or this will get changed. Sometimes they get shocked. I know sometimes with age comes additional diagnosis of any kind of adult kind of neuropsychiatric illnesses, and that is a bigger blow. I mean, they think they've gone past the basic diagnosis altering kind of thoughts, but now there are new diagnoses, new challenges coming up. And I feel relative to parents of younger children, the parents of somewhat older children are more at peace with medications. They realize it's not going to be dramatic, but they have got limited and necessary role. And I find parents more comfortable with this discussions around such themes. And most have decided the why and what of it, though sometimes they get surprised by new things coming up, like I said. But functioning more than the diagnosis is the target. I mean, this is my humble little description of the parents. I mean, all of you gathered here. Many times when I've seen you in clinical context, I mean, this is the kind of generic impression I carry, and a lot of my thoughts are having this picture in mind. So, like I said, I mean, when we say very little, I mean, I'm sure there are reams and reams written about it, but I don't think really, I mean, see, very simple things. I mean, the kind of intervention, somebody will say, okay, they have set up these kind of community support systems in such and such a country. I mean, the kind of backbone of health structure that exists there, and the kind of people who have been involved from the beginning, the cultural notions that are prevalent there, which and the kind of processes which ensures that only the government can provide these kind of services. It's such a whole lot of issues around that to just think that why can't we do that here can be incredibly simplistic. And that is why I say, what do we know? Very little, because I'm going to share a little bit about about what we have tried to do and understand. It didn't really go anywhere because the TAP study that I have written there, it started in 2008, and it's a small little survey. I'll describe the results. Mrs. Mathias was part of it. There were many other organizations in the city who participated in it. But I'm going to present it anyway. But when we did talk about it to a couple of family gatherings like this, families totally negated the results in that survey. So I'm going to share it still because I want to just sound it by another new set of parents. But once they did that, we decided not to go ahead with publishing it because we weren't even sure if we got the information right. And then, of course, the Global Autism Convention that we had 2 years ago, and we hope to have it more often. I mean, the Global Autism Convention we did in 2011 got focused more on early intervention and young children and so on. After that, we got caught up at St. John's with a lot of basic kind of research, and then we finally, when we did put some money together and again got the whole citywide organizations to come together for the Global Autism Convention 2018, we were very, very fortunate that families, siblings, self-advocates, agencies, they all came together and spoke. So I'll just share very briefly what they said there. But I honestly don't think too much information exists about youth and young adults with developmental delays in the Indian context. And any information an organization like Mitra can put together, I think is incredibly valuable. So the TAP study is actually teenagers and adults with, P was actually pervasive development disorders, short of some complicated name for autism. So we just said TAP's study, we called it TAP study. So it was a snowballed survey starting with organizations and kids who have grown up in those organizations, gone on to be older. And very often, I'm actually aware in the city, organizations will just shut down door one day saying your child is 16 and we don't have anything to offer, please don't come again tomorrow. And it's, I mean, and these are organizations incredibly involved with helping children. And in fact, to be fair, they said they had given them a year to think about and say, next year we're going to stop you, you better start planning. Don't blame us when we close the door. And they did close the door. And I know it must have been so hard for both the organization and the families. So we went to them and asked, okay, who do you know who are older, who've been with you? And it's just a snowball from family to family. And we got data on about 50 people. And this is largely those who carried a diagnosis of autism. And in that, mostly it was 3:1 male ratio, that it's more common in men. Nearly 2/3 had epilepsy, and 60% were on various kinds of medications. About a third had received different types of educational interventions. Okay, this was probably 2008, and if they're like mean age is 22, these are people probably going up in the 80s and the early 90s who probably, those are the early days of these services developing in the city. So probably just a third had got educational interventions. And in this group, over a third had achieved self-care with minimal supervision, and only 2 needed constant supervision. So the rest are somewhere in between. So a large number obviously needed supervision for self-care. Okay. But I think when we present the data like this, they said, you mean that's all you think? You don't know every single person needs help with self-care. You're just making it seem like most people have achieved self-care. These are some of the comments made on this data. These were data based on pen and paper survey. Just ask families, what do you think of this? We just took the information. So obviously we got it wrong in the way we did it. But anyway, they said about 60% could kind of carry out goal-directed activities. So we're looking at persons who are probably significantly disabled. Okay, may not be true as more and more families have come together now, even with persons with milder development delays. Probably they have higher expectations about what can be done and what needs to be done. And this was a surprise, and this is what most families in the second and third meetings we had with wider set, they negated it totally. When we said disruptive behavior was seen only in 10% of the 50 people, they just didn't believe it. I mean, they said this is just not acceptable. I think, they are so experienced. They talked to other families with similar difficulties. They said, we don't think it's this low. I'm sure over 60 to 80% must be having disruptive behavior. So your survey details are not acceptable. I'm bringing this up just to say that we probably didn't access the right sample. This was talking about 12 years ago. And we probably didn't ask the right questions, maybe. And it's possible that the families also probably, just uh, probably just tick whatever boxes they felt comfortable with. I really think this should be the starting point for doing something like this. And if we can get information on at least 150 to 200 persons of this age group, I really think in a very top-down manner we can start planning and say, okay, we take a 5-year plan. This is the data we have, and we have to make sure that at least in 6 parts of the city, so much of services for at least this many number in each area must be set up. Something like this can be really planned. I think we should revisit this study methods and redo it all over again. Everyone had concerns about residents and future. To say that only 1 out of 50 had sexually disinhibited behavior, I mean, the later groups just laughed at us and said, this is absolutely unreliable. Over half of people have this difficulty. You probably just did not ask the right question. So that was our sad little study, which we hope we can redo it in a different sort of way. Then the 2018 Global Autism Convention, I mean, brave siblings came forward, discussed challenges with caring. Some of them very openly said how they have been losing out because of the care that parents have to give for the person with the difficulties. But most gathered seemed happy to care, actually. And parents reported brave efforts. I mean, so this is what it is. I mean, I'm sure, knowing that there is no model available and knowing that professionals don't have a plan, I mean, a lot of individual families with maybe very special resources, incredibly motivated parents have gone on to get some wonderful things out of persons with disabilities and, got them through a lot of things. I'm sure the parents assembled here have far more information of that than I do. And of course, they're the ones who probably come forward and share. Okay, but maybe there are many others who are struggling because this has not happened. There was this lady from Peru. I mean, I was typing out the slide today. I couldn't remember her name, but she's an incredible woman. So probably before the end of the presentation today, her name will come back to me. She is somebody who, I don't know, she just is so very positive. She talked about how independence, purpose, and happiness are the 3 goals for persons with young adults with any developmental disabilities. And she made a case for how this job has to start when they are very young, not just when they reach 15, 18 years of age. So this is probably one of the first messages I really want to share. I'm scared to share it because we'll come back to professionals having not done their job earlier on. So I'm one of them, equally culpable. But I really think somehow we need to get into the mindset right from the beginning. And here is where some amount of acceptance in the first 5 to 7 years of age, that if this is the level of disability described, we should not be wasting time on scholastic activities and so on, but focus on making children more independent. I mean, this unforeseen pandemic pushing people into the house. I mean, we are hearing wonderful stories of children now with no school, nothing else to focus upon. They're actually learning a lot of skills sitting at home. So if it is possible out of compulsion, why don't we do it out of a conscious choice? So she really goes on to say that it's definitely possible to start if you focus on independence very early on. And that was probably one of the biggest messages that came out of the conference, because she was so persuasive in argument. She showed a whole lot of case studies that she has done. So I do think that we need to, at some point before 8, 9 years of age, decide that the child has only so much difficulty. And if half a dozen different experts and school teachers have said that studies may not happen actually, or it's going to happen, but you keep that as low focus, but start focusing on independence and developing skills in them, I think we need to encourage parents to actually take those kind of decisions up. In fact, accommodating parents' and helping them with continued efforts when the teachers are very clear that this boy will need a lot of help in many other ways in the future. I think in some way it's a very unfair thing, but I think professionals also feel very boxed into trying to help parents, and I think this is something that's got to change. A few lines on our organization. I mean, very generous people have come forward and supported us. While we are interested in research on understanding biology of autism and so on, we have kept aside a whole chunk of funds and ideas and programs and personnel for working with teenagers and young adults with, it's not necessarily autism, but all developmental disorders. There's a little more focus on autism. And we wish to actually we actually plan to start this from 1st June, and obviously this COVID reasons are come in the way and we are not really taken off on this. What we wish to do is to take 15 to 20 youngsters just like Mitra is doing, okay? And I mean, the project permits us to have the luxury of actually being with them as often as possible, visit their place, go out with them, do a whole lot of, try different activities with them and understand really, I don't want to just act as if I'm being humble. To be honest, I really think we need to first understand what the real issues and needs are. I can imagine, I can think, I can do a survey and ask, but I don't think we're getting it right. And one of the jobs that we wish to do is to actually work with about 20 odd youngsters with whom we can actually work very closely for 1 to 2 years to develop some kind of a program for this. And I think in this kind of situation, for this goal, working with organizations like Mitra would be something that we truly look forward to. And I hope today's conversation can be the beginning of several more. And what we will not, I mean, we will probably not be able to say that they can all be accommodated in a center run by us. I mean, CareAd has taken this idea that we'll certainly not say that everybody will start coming to one place and they spend the whole day there and go back. I mean, these kind of daycare models have been experimented in the city, and we certainly are not keen on going down that route. There are many centers who are confident and comfortable doing it, and I think we would like to work with those centers. But certainly we do not wish to actually run a center like that directly, where from morning 9 to 5 persons come and stay. Though I'm not at all undermining the importance of such centers, it gives so much of support and respite for families, while also giving opportunities to understand how to help the youngsters. But definitely running that kind of center is not part of CareAd's goals. So I must say, I must thank Mitra for giving us a chance to have this kind of communication with very important stakeholders. And this one of the, though we have had some connect with the press on what CareAd is standing for, this is probably the first time on this topic I'm getting a chance to actually share with parents. Why we think these interactions happening today are important? Because I really feel, I mean, we need to, I think much as we could say that we'll think of doing something, we feel that unless parents themselves come forward and are really willing to work on this, I'm not sure models are going to evolve and develop. And unless parents start becoming strong advocates for what needs to be done for the youngsters and demand the society to help them, I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, we might have some honorable, good things happening in different pockets, but to have a broad plan, we say now we can be like, for example, though its early intervention is still unfortunately not part of the government's public health model, okay? But the idea that early intervention is necessary is fairly more prevalent in a city like Bangalore today than it was probably 20 years ago, right? Now, that kind of a deep-seated thought process that persons like this can actually have this kind of a service available to them. I mean, I think this idea is not going to come unless parents join hands. No professionals or professional groups, however well-funded, however meaningful, however strong they may be in the academic field, they will not be able to make this happen, because this is going to involve working with policymakers, public health officials, and so on. And unless the direct stakeholders are going to be involved, this is not going to happen. So I think these interactions are extremely important. And that's why I would say that the goal of CareAd is to think and work together. So that's a bit about our organization. Coming to some few specific things, because these are questions that have actually been sent by parents. Before I continue, could I just ask, it's right for me to continue in English, or do you think I should change language?
So I think we have a few people joining us from other cities other than Bangalore. So I think you can continue in English. We can take some question answers in Kannada if required.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, here it is. I mean, basically, it comes down to control. I mean, all these are questions around control, because you are faced with unpredictability. So it's managing aggression, managing non-compliance. We're not talking about non-compliance with something major things. It's non-compliance with he will not eat his food today, or he doesn't want to wear clothes today, or, managing aggression, managing non-compliance. it comes down to saying, making them cooperative. I mean, permit me to add the little tiny line in the end. Okay, parents would have tried all of those. Okay, so if there is Sama Beda Dandopaya, it's I think a Sanskrit phrase. I'm sure all over the country people will understand that. People who have tried all these things, and I know organizations which would support quite a few of these, each one of these 4 principles, okay, because everyone is helpless. So thing is, can we control? The question here is, can we control? I really think if this question is being asked when a person is 15, 16, we probably already lost half the battle, because this is something that has to go into place from the very beginning, where you can actually, when they are tinier and the parents are stronger and they can establish rules and regulations, and they can establish how the family works and insist on others to follow and so on. I think many of these things have to be in place. If it's very hard, if that has not happened, to suddenly start imposing rules and regulations, because it will probably get away sometimes with persons without disabilities, even if you allow them to be a bit lackadaisical in their younger days, because you can at least explain and reason with them. But here, if you have not done it, you could explain and reason a lot with persons with developmental disabilities. But if you have not put these rules and said it's okay, then to suddenly say it's not okay, it's incredibly difficult. So, yeah, I definitely would not be spending much time. There's only one single slide later on about medications. They always are there, and like I find parents are far more willing to consider this as some option when this happens. But medications are for people who are probably, aggressive day in and day out and highly disruptive, and parents are just not getting a wink of sleep, and a whole lot of everyday simplest activities are not happening. I mean, you really need to choose, and in those persons, we'll probably have to take a call. When I come to the medication slide, I'll explain that there are definitely safe options there. But obviously, when you ask these questions, medications are now the first port of call, really. So I think parents will really need to see how to help them if by chance they have not managed to set rules and regulations, how to help them do this. Now, while my teacher, Professor Girimaji at NIMHANS, taught me that, see, intellectual disability or any major development disorders, they're just a deficit state, certain abilities are not there. Anything other than that is not a must. It doesn't have to be there. So it's aggressive behavior or any kind of disruption. I mean, it cannot be seen as part of that condition. And therefore, right from younger ages, it should be managed. It cannot be just say, he's like this, he doesn't understand, we can't let it be. So we need to see that as an area that has to be focused upon and managed. Now, a lot of parents would have tried a lot to make this happen from younger days, I'm sure. I don't want to blame them for not trying it from early, but it's possible that some of them have probably not made that a main focus of their activity. So here is where it comes, that if in younger ages, if we give more focus on, things that we desperately want them to learn, and we buffer all other difficulties they have, we may actually end up finding that later on, many things which parents were desperate for them to learn has probably not really happened to an extent they would have liked, but they have missed the bus in managing a whole lot of other behaviors which are now looming as big challenges. Now, this is something that comes up very strongly in a whole lot of families, that at least who seek help when they come to clinical setting. So then I personally feel when that happens, I think a ready-made fix definitely is not going to work, or a medical option is certainly not going to be the complete solution at all. Very often, I think we have found that if parents are generally at peace and more, let's say, having their own way of communicating and working with youngsters with difficulties, they are able to figure out a way to actually bring down these difficulties. Every time I want to keep apologizing that if I seem to indicate that it's a fault on part of the parents, that's not what I mean to say. What I mean is when parents do come to us with this, I would think that instead of asking the professional on how to control that, they should be willing to make changes from their side. if that would be the starting point, and it may take a while to see the results of that, and they should be willing to understand that kind of a time frame instead of insisting on some kind of an intervention that's entirely directed at the person concerned. So that's probably something that I really want to say. And I'm sure in individual persons, there can be a lot of things to think about. Very often, well, I mean, you would hear from teachers, trainers, that they need to be kept occupied in a meaningful sort of way and to reduce the occasions for aggression to come up. This is a very sound advice, okay? And this is something that should be probably one of the best ways to actually make it happen. But to be honest, that would have needed a whole lot of work right from the beginning to see that they get involved in, they're able to sit and do a whole lot of things. This fabulous lady from Peru is probably getting mysterious. I would probably keep saying like that, so you can all go quickly and find out who is this lady from Peru. Her name is Liliana Mayo. It's come to me now. Liliana Mayo is M-A-Y-O-U. Liliana Mayo is fabulously, and she says, putting structure and rules and how they should follow should start from the time the child is 5 or 6 years of age or even younger. Don't wait for this to start later. But if you happen to be a parent of a person who's somewhat very disruptive and you're finding it difficult to make them do many of the things listed in the slide, I think when you do meet professionals or work with organizations such as Mitra, you should be willing to make a lot of changes from your side. Maybe the family way of working will change, the structure will change, you may have to modify a few things on how you run your day, and it may be necessary. So managing and making the persons cooperative is not going to come without accommodating to their needs and making them, in some way helped and supported. So that's really the message for this slide. The point and question that came up, but parents asking, I mean, this is a person, I think somebody who's actually trying to go through open school system and working through that. And some of them have actually asked the parents why we cannot have courses like engineering, why we can't travel alone like others, and why we can't, share our thoughts with other people ourselves without somebody having to monitor and tell us. And they are struggling to actually tell them why this is, how do I put it across to them that they have these limitations. Yeah, I think this conversation probably starts from very beginning, continues all the time, but we need to, this is where, again, I'm going back to my, the lady from Peru angle. What she says is, have you actually worked with the person? And he says, why I can't do that, sit with him, may not be just this thing, but any activity, help sit with him, try work with him and say, let's see, we work together, can we try what you can do? Okay. And see if you can actually keep putting little piece by piece for him to actually work on it, instead of trying to answer this question, may work with him and try what he can do. And very often, some of them may understand the limitation, some of them may surprise you by what they can actually do, right? So, so she would not accept that there is a limitation, right? Okay. But very often parents would be seeing that there are limitations and they're struggling to actually explain that to them. I think taking a very action-oriented model to help the person become aware of the difficulty, at the same time making sure they're not crushed, because you're then pointing out the things that they can actually do and what you actually like them for, because affection, love, self-esteem, every human being is going to relate to it, okay? The diagnosis does not come in the way. So how we are actually going to make them not feel hurt, but actually gradually work with the parents to find out what that limitation is. I mean, that's probably would be the way I would take this forward if this question were posed to me in the clinic by a parent. On the other side, we have this other issue. Somebody is very excited by praise. What happens is you just say, oh, you've done a great job today. And then they get so excited, they start wanting to do so many other things and they believe everything is possible for them. I mean, it's posed as a question. I mean, I would think we should take that as a starting point to make them feel that they should actually try many more things. Okay. You can actually structure the conversation and activity and tell them, okay, you've done this very well, you want to do more things, okay, let's start trying to do this, let's start trying to do this, rather than just getting fixated on how we are going to make him understand this. So both the answers are pointing out to the idea that you're not going to try and give them any, you don't look for the magic statements to make them understand, but you're going to actually work with them to recognize their strengths and difficulties and help them feel good about the strengths they have and make them actually try more things. So instead of struggling with how to communicate, we should actually start working with them. They will figure out, all of us figure out our limitations too. Both these items are somewhat similar, so I kind of club them together. Caught up with stereotype rituals, daily doing the same kind of activities. Okay. So yeah, I mean, especially in persons with autism maybe. But to the extent the second example says that if when they're doing something and parents don't like it and they've actually scolded them, the next day they demand is that the scolding also happen in the exact stereotype way possible, because that's how the person can connect with it. Yeah, I mean, these are very, very well-known clinical situations, right? Now, the repetitive behaviors in autism at an younger age are seen as just a sign of it's integral to the diagnosis. It's part of the autism spectrum disorder. But as they grow older and they're beyond 12 to 15 years of age, if any particular activity starts becoming so very consuming them that they can actually get, it's become so disruptive because many other things they are actually not doing. While the younger children don't respond to treatments directed at obsessive compulsive disorder, because that whole idea doesn't apply at an younger age at all. Okay, this may be a group that probably as they grow older, the brain substrates, the brain processors are actually capable of responding to certain kind of treatment options. So we'll have to look at it, because the diagnosis entirely rests on the intensity, the frequency, and how much of disruption that's happening from that. Okay, but it's also possible to find out if the person himself feels stuck in it. Okay, and it's possible sometimes the person desperately wants to get out of it and try other things, but is actually stuck within it. We need to, so just asking them to stop or taking away the objects which they may be using for these stereotyped activities may elicit a lot of it may just elicit a lot of opposition and disruptive behaviors from them. And many families would have realized it's not going to work so easily. Though some are lucky, some are creative, they do figure out ways to make sure that those objects, if hidden away, the person can be gradually brought on to doing other things. So I'm sure parents should be allowed to try those kind of things and see if they can get the person to refocus on something else. But if it is actually independent diagnosis such as obsessive compulsive disorder, then it can happen that it's the distress and the restlessness that comes when they're not doing it can become so much. Okay, that can be a clue to saying that maybe this person can respond to certain types of medical interventions. So this is something to be taught about. On the other hand, I know earlier, I think she's no more today. I mean, the one person, I mean, she has her own unusual ways of doing things. Mrs. Shantalakshmi Chandrasekhar, for some of you, she may ring a bell, some of you may know her. She was running a recreational hobby center somewhere in South Bangalore, and she would insist that you look for what is it that they got stereotyped interest in, and she would actually convert that into an activity that can actually lead to some kind of her focus was handcrafts and stuff like that, so she would make them do things like that. But the idea is, can you convert a stereotyped interest into a productive and purposeful job, which actually can lead to a lot of improved self-esteem for the individual, because the people are going to really benefit from it and thank them for it. Again, it's not something that's going to happen in all situations, but it's something to think about and see if we can actually make use of it rather than fighting with it. Yeah, so we have talked about 3 possible solutions. One is to see if it is milder version and you can actually make them forget it by removing the required objects and stuff, and give them alternative options and keep them engaged in that so they don't get coming back to this. Second is to explore if it can be converted into a purposeful activity, so they're doing that activity but it's leading to something more useful, or see if it is becoming extremely non-purposeful and very disruptive, whether some kind of a pharmacological or medication management can give you some kind of relief. I have simplified it. I'm sure many will fall in between, and they may not. You may find that you don't have options for any of this to apply, but let's make a start with that. It's possibly some of the things to think about in this context. A lot of parents' questions are about personal safety, personal space. Okay, I'm sure sex education must be figuring in. Any family gatherings, we're talking about persons of this age group who are having the difficulty in understanding social etiquettes and rules. So again, I mean, processes have to start very early for these things to happen, but also there should be a willingness to actually explore rather than just respond to the anxiety that comes from saying this person may not know how to do in this situation. Definitely when it comes to interest in sexual preferences and so on, it can be more challenging because you may be directly causing a challenge to people who are other people in the society, and families can understandably get concerned about where they stand in the eyes of law and so on. But in general, in all these questions, I think what is needed is to trust the person and give him an opportunity to explore and take them through it step by step and see what is possible. And also try to set limits and say this is allowed, not allowed. This is not something that's going to be, it's a project in itself, and it has to be actually done in a very individual manner. But I think if we don't make the concerned person a partner in trying to figure out how to teach them personal safety, how to teach them concepts of personal space, if it's going to be an instruction kind of thing, it's not going to happen. So it will mean that we develop a lot of comfort level in working with them. I think it's very important for that to actually form some kind of a bond with the person concerned and help them actually feel that they can feel comfortable in discussing some matters with this particular person. And then it can start the journey of actually teaching them what the limits are and what is permitted and what is not permitted. I'm sure questions on this will come up later on when I finish my talk, so I'll leave this for now. Yeah, I have heard a lot about how to ensure long-term residential arrangements. I mean, this is again a thought that keeps coming up in the minds of families. There are a lot of well-known statements that families constantly keep coming up with in this kind of context. Some have gone out and saying, no, we'll actually plan it ourselves and do something. I mean, organizations like KPMRC and, Alamara, I'm not sure the Almara work it's still a work in progress, I think. There are organizations in Hyderabad, and now there's an India Autism Center in Kolkata. I mean, they're all trying at small to big. I think there's some other Capra or Carrera or something in Chennai. They have coming out with large-scale residential opportunities. People can live in dorms, people can live individually, families can stay there at different levels. They may become part of that community, or sometimes they, so on. There are different kind of projects are happening around the country in about half a dozen locations, looking at long-term residential projects for persons with mental illness. I just want to share a thought that we have at CareAd around this. I'm not very, very happy with this. I know it's very sad to say, because families are end up at tether, and if this is available and they're comfortable, I don't want to run that down as an option at all. If it works well and they're comfortable with it, I would definitely think they should go for it. But deep down within me, I feel uncomfortable that we just create walled spaces in one or the other segment of the society and say all these persons cannot be comfortably protected and taken care of amidst society. They should actually be taken to a particular space and kept. Has a very uncomfortable connotation with how things used to happen 100, 200 years ago. And I'm somehow not at all comfortable with this idea. I don't want to run that idea down. A lot of families are finding some peace that there is a place where they're confident that person will receive care and help. So I honestly don't want to take that away. But a dream that we would probably want to do is, can we set up community residences in the community, where it could be a colony, it can be a place with, say, apartments, a place with individual houses. We expect the local community, it can be a residential welfare association or the kind of association within an apartment, something, if they can actually say, we'll set aside this one unit where maybe 3 or 4 persons with developmental disabilities can actually live. And it has to have support from different quarters, and maybe that association or that property developer or whoever has to be given a lot of concessions to, the government has to give him some kind of concessions for having made that happen. But but maybe a professional drops in every day and sees that they're all managing themselves and they're taught to live. I am somehow more thinking about these options. Honestly, we don't have a clear blueprint in front of us. Okay. But because a lot of these projects are happening, I thought I'll also share and say maybe there are different ways of thinking about it also. I honestly feel that any of those available today, if parents are comfortable with it, I think they should definitely go for it. I don't want to definitely in any way deride that option, but the thoughts in CareAd are that we probably need to work towards these kind of things. It will mean that it's hard, it's unpredictable, things can go wrong. We probably need to have enough supervision put into it. We need to work with public health, public officials to see that they permit a lot of things here. But I'm sure if we share the idea and work with, we'll find that some developers, some community coming forward to do this. And after 2 or 3 such opportunities, I'm sure the idea will grow that persons with development disorders with a little bit of support, many of them can be helped to actually live and support each other rather than actually needing someone else to take care of them. I'm very optimistic about this, except for the persons with extremely lower levels of abilities who may probably need continued custodial kind of caring option. But I would, at CareAd, we would rather think about those kind of options. Believe me, we don't have a blueprint on it, but this is precisely the reason why I want to talk and interact with parents in this kind of forum, because we are looking forward to families coming forward to actually thinking about working on these kind of lines. And then again, coming to vocation, I mean, I'll take the second part first. I mean, Vinyas was shared at the Global Autism Convention in 2018. I mean, this is something that's run by this very far-sighted individual who is actually the son of Professor of Psychiatry at NIMHANS, Dr. H.S. Narayan. His son who's decided that he's actually going to work with persons with intellectual disability and actually make them work. And he has no corners allowed. They are treated as absolutely capable, stable employees. They need to abide. They come on time. They have to do everything. There's no concession shown to them, but they get fairly comfortable pay. And he feels that actually he's running it as a very successful enterprise than running it as an NGO, just helping out persons, making them feel they have some kind of a livelihood. So that's not the goal at all. So, coming back from there as an example that exists, and if Vinyas is what's his name? It's not coming again to me. But if you can get the gentleman to come and speak at Mitra, and actually, he might probably ignite you all with new ideas about how employment opportunities can be generated. So can we make them productive rather than being protected? I mean, that's really the crux of the question. And I think, much as it may sound very just like sloganeering or something, I would think we should actually think along those lines. And we are not looking at somebody who is, doing something very minimalistic just to the respite care model. I told you in the beginning itself, we would not be keen on a respite care, daycare model for care. And I'm not saying anything wrong with that model. The point I'm making is that should not be the only goal. We should be looking at not just protecting a person with developmental disabilities, but actually making him productive. I know there have been many more other such options also. And I'm sure an organization like Mitra will also come out with plans around these areas. But for them, we need to identify strengths. I'm going back to my good friend Liliana Mayo from Peru. She says, aim big. You think they can't do it? That's nonsense. You come, I'll show them, I'll make them, they'll do it. What do you think he can't? You think he can't change the wheel of a car? I'll show him he can change the wheel of a car. And, and they actually change the wheel of a car. I mean, we are amazed by the videos she puts across. And I think somewhere there's got to be a fundamental change in the way we think about abilities and disabilities. And we think, given opportunities, given encouragement, and given a push, I think a whole lot of new strengths can be discovered. And rather than seeing them as people who are having to be taken care of, they can start helping the city. Here I'm going to float an idea. I'm sure it's not novel. I'm sure many of you have thought about it, but I'll say it anyway. I'm sure, I'm willing to take a bet on this. By 2030, I think 30 to 40%, if not 50% of South Bangalore is not going to cook. In 10 years time, I think we have really learned all the bad behaviors, we are not going to cook. I'm amazed at the way persons with autism pick up cooking skills. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I got a 10-year-old who has actually conducted a feast for 20 persons coming to their house. It's their incredible ability to follow instructions, recipes, and they can repeatedly do it. And the way they can actually do it. I mean, I really think if we can have persons with developmental disabilities form a large group and beat all the Taza Tindi and I'm sorry, I don't have anything against them, but it's just a name I'm saying. Okay, they're also very nice, good people. But, all of them can have their kitchens run by persons with this, and they'll probably have it running far better than how it's happening now, because the self-esteem that comes to persons with developmental disabilities when they're given a productive routine, and that's what I learned from this lady, Liliana Mayo, and her videos, that they would actually deliver more, produce more than you can actually imagine. And I think we are probably not trying this hard at all, and I think we should think about it. For me, working around the cooking angle has been a very passionate idea. And when I say Care Adhd is going to take up and work with 15-20 youngsters to find out what they can do, this will be something we're going to really pursue. And in today's world, I think an idea can suddenly take a lot of life and develop faster. But I think we first need to believe that it's possible. And I would belong to the group that believes that this is possible. Back to medications, I think they're definitely helpful. I assure you they're helpful. And a whole lot of medications exist which would not be giving too much side effects. It'll take, instead of 1 week to help out the family, it'll probably take 3 months to get there, because we're going very low, very slow, building it up. So there's some amount of effort involved, patience involved, but it's definitely possible. And we need to also make diagnosis, just like adult can develop bipolar disorders and depressive episodes and anxiety disorders, phobias, obsessive compulsive disorders. So many adult onset psychiatric illnesses can also apply to persons with developmental disabilities. So when you find some kind of a persistent difficult behavior, a good assessment, which may take some time actually to complete, is very important. And following that, I think having very targeted remedies, a whole lot of relief can come from medications. And I would definitely think we should try this and give it a wholehearted try, especially if, if the family is really going under the weight of these challenges that the person is actually having. So we need to balance the person's needs also, because I think the youngster should not be just made to sit quiet and, do nothing and just be there, because he's otherwise going to be disruptive. Then we probably not understood the person. We are not given him opportunities to find out what he can do. And I really think that would be a very sad use of medication, right? So parents need to be willing to work with broader goals with professionals, rather than insisting that this is all they want, somehow make sure this stops. And sometimes professionals feel very hurt to see the degree of disturbance and disruption that's happening, and the parents are at their wits' end. I mean, things have been broken and families have been hurt so badly physically. So you feel like actually going ahead with some very aggressive medical option. I think we need to really, at that point, think about keeping the person's own needs as well as the family's needs in mind. I'm sure if you allow for a 2-3 month gradual assessment process, a whole lot of good medication options are available to manage difficult behaviors in young adults. Yeah, so how do we go about it? I really think forming groups is one way. Having organizations such as Mitra is definitely one way. Deciding to come out of that distress in which the family might have got trapped is very important before any meaningful action is going to happen. So I think some amount of sharing of distress, making peace and some kind of comfort, and then steeling themselves up to actually come forward with meaningful action is necessary. Just desperately hoping that a quick prescription may be available to solve the problem is not going to help. In addition, I feel also medications are used for other people in the family also. Yeah, and, I mean, 15% of family, the population is at risk of developing anxiety and depressive disorders. So sometimes helping other people in the family also take treatment and become far more comfortable and relaxed, which may have a very big positive effect on the youngster that they are coping with. Okay, it's again something to think about. So when I say come out of distress, I don't mean they all need to take medication, but I think some amount of sharing and working, again, forming groups, being together thinking through and also getting whatever help needed for their own mental state. I think this is needed before any meaningful action will come. Otherwise, we are going to jump in impulsively, try something, or say, okay, we'll leave him there, leave him here, or try this. This is all. We are quite happy to settle for this. I think we'll probably miss the bus in coming out with a very useful and very gratifying kind of plans. And I also feel Mrs. Mathias is here, and I know I don't want to kind of make it seem like use a forum to criticize anybody. But I think organizations which are working for persons with developmental disability should gradually have more and more younger parents who are now working and finding that they have got children with difficulties, and who are parents who are probably in their 40s and 50s should come forward and work with the organizations that exist and try to bring in more energy into these organizations. They are doing human service. I mean, the organizations in Bangalore are really struggling hard and doing a great job, but I think they will all be really bolstered and get a huge lot of impetus if parents are willing to come forward and form groups, because it's needed for their own sake and needed for the society too. So I think a lot of organizations that say should not allow saying, okay, there others are looking after this, they'll somehow take care, but actually come forward, and a younger, energetic lot of parents have to come together and work with the available organizations and take many of these initiatives forward. This is probably my last slide. I would like to insist that Unit of Hope, which is basically the Center for Children with Special Needs, and Year Old Adhd is something more specifically aligned with autism. We are willing to partner all those working in this regard, and we would like to learn and act together. So this is, I'm actually probably taking advantage of the platform given to me by Mitra to say that this is our message, and we want people to come forward and work together. And we would like to work with people and organizations and try and evolve models for how youngsters can become more independent, happy, and productive too. Thank you. I could take questions. I know I left it a bit generic, but if there are some specific questions, I'm quite happy to take now.
Yes, Mrs. Sandhya, are you there? Okay, so there are a lot of, there are quite a few questions.
I should open up the chat box or something?
Yeah, we've typed it out on the chat box, sir. I can help you with them. A lot of them.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Yeah, Mrs. Sandhya, you're here. Yes, please take.
Yeah.
So if a lot of
so
questions.
The first,
I know.
I'm so sorry.
I can see that.
Yeah. So here it is. The first one is how to deal with aggression with 15-year-old ADHD boy. This is not regular, but when it occurs, it is really high. That is the first question which has been entered, sir.
Okay, all right. I'll take, yeah, see, the thing is, if you feel that the child has always received a diagnosis of ADHD, okay, and now has become a youngster and continues to be restless and impulsive and becomes very disruptive around the place, then believe me, a good medical management is fundamentally necessary, and it's possible also for more than 70 to 80% of persons in that situation. So I really think we need to, in a broad sense, I can say that you should definitely find a place where you get a good assessment and a good medication management. That's fundamental. Okay. Now, unlike younger children where you can say that, you can actually limit the situation, or parents can actually put set boundaries on what is allowed and not allowed and so on, it starts getting very harder. We can talk about that to parents, but I know parents will not be able to actually do it. So I think if there is a clear diagnosis of ADHD that you mentioned, and today ADHD is recognized to be a developmental disorder that can continue to have its impact throughout the lifespan. Okay. So making sure that a good management of ADHD medically happens will allow a lot of potential that's probably not getting used in the person to be actually to come up, and you may actually find that there are many more opportunities opening for that person. So I would say that since you mentioned ADHD, I'm taking the easy route by saying that good medication management is possible and it's a must.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So now the next question is how do we
handle repetitive talking?
Repetitive talking?
I'm sure the repetitive talking is something that's probably happened right from younger days. It's very unlikely it came up later. Maybe the content, the phrase being used, the statement being made might have changed across time, right? But it's very unlikely it just came up as after 15, 20 years of age. And if it did by chance, okay, maybe that needs a different kind of diagnostic assessment. But so what, if it is just repetitive talking and it's been there right from younger days, they are not exactly going to be very medication sensitive also, right? And so we need to have a lot of systems put in to help this person. And I've already mentioned the challenges around that. We need to find out how and where this repetitive talking happens. If it's there across all contexts, how do we lay down clear rules in the way the person can understand what is allowed and what is not allowed? And we need to help them to actually come out with a way of indexing how this repetitive talking, when it is happening as a problem behavior, they start becoming aware and recognize that. And this will take a lot of work with them to make them realize that, but we need to do that. And then we need to kind of involve them in saying, these are going to be the consequences if this continues. Now, this I would say would need something like 15 to 20 hours of working with the person to come up with the plan. We have found that if people are actually finally making that connection and understanding that this is something that's not allowed and this is exactly the problem that others are actually saying, you should not be talking like this, they are actually willing to help. Many times they are not understood from their side. In a child, you could probably have a different way because the child is not comprehending it. But for a young adult or an adolescent, you need to help them actually see that this repeated talking is something that we don't approve of and we are not going to permit. Okay. So one is, helping them actually become partners in a behavioral management program to actually control their repetitive talking to whatever extent they can bring in their energies to do. Secondly, to see if they can be kept meaningfully occupied in so many different sort of ways that they do not actually have to indulge in this repetitive talking. If you see repetitive talking as an expression of either boredom or not having any other things to do, then you're going to make sure that you're going to keep them in an interested activity that actually helps them feel to enjoy what they are doing, so that the likelihood of this, the good thing is, if this can go on for even 3 to 4 months, the unused behavior, in this case not repeatedly talking, tends to gradually fade away. So you're really not focusing in this case on the repeated talking itself, but you're actually focusing on making them very actively involved in an thing that they actually like, or you can actually bring them to like, or you're going to plan strategically to build reinforcements to make sure they like and they start doing, so that the alternative difficult activity starts coming down in some sort of way. There could be a very small number of people for whom the talking can be the sign of a tic disorder or sign of an obsessive compulsive disorder. Maybe medical management will have to be explored for that. But like I said, the key things here would be to focus on working with them to develop a behavioral management program, or working with them to see that a more enjoyable alternative is actually set up for them. Repetitive stereotype behaviors, medically, we have understood very little about it. It's something that doesn't go away. What happens is, very often over time, that is so much of a lesser issue because there are so many other concerns on the minds of the parents. We just let it be because we want to choose our battles, and we say, okay, let that be. And very often that kind of tends to go on without any intervention. So if it is a difficulty, there are ways of working with it, but I would think we need around 15 to 20 hours of professional work to actually show that this behavior can actually improve. The medication needs to be continued. I think the next question, I'm not sure what it is with reference to. That will obviously be depending on what condition for which the medication has been given for. Right, but definitely I have never come across a context in the clinical work where we say medications are for a few days or a couple of weeks or something, unless it is, they're going on a pilgrimage, or they're going on a holiday somehow and they want to keep him calm or something like that. Maybe then it could probably apply. Otherwise, medicines are in the medium and the longer term for sure. But I think we really need to understand what it is being given for before we can answer the question. It'd be great if you can give a few pointers on early education, adolescence. Okay. About adolescence. Okay. Right. I don't know if everybody can see this screen, so I'll just read it out. It would be great if you can give a few pointers on how to prepare the person for adolescence. I mean, this is a fabulous question. I don't have a real answer to this, but I think we should be conversing around these things. My daughter is 6 years now. We're practicing self-care with girl perspectives, such as changing dress in closed areas. Somebody asked a slide about, personal safety. I mean, here is a wonderful mother planning very early. Closed door while in bath and toilet, taking clothes off in front of only mama. We are still practicing all this. What else can I start early? I wish my daughter understands the perspective with time and ease. I feel what you started off seems really wonderful. Okay, I don't think there are too many things about other things that you're really worried about adolescence that you can help a child at 6 understand. But the kind of preparation that you've begun seems to be extremely well thought through. I think it can probably be a good listen. So I really think this particular mother has started early and is doing a great job. I mean, I think at 6, a whole lot of adolescent issue, if you're talking about, say, you're talking about menstrual periods, you're talking about sexual safety and so on, maybe the child definitely is not ready for. I mean, I can say that. And you've already beginning to instill in her an idea of what is privacy and what is safety. And I'm sure as she learns that, you can build on the other components that are more relevant for adolescence once the girl is around 8 or 9 years of age. But I think it's a very heartening attempt to think far ahead and help out this child. Thank you actually for bringing that up. And depression and bipolar symptoms get controlled as he gets older with medication. That's a question asked by mother. Yeah. And if it's a clear diagnosis of bipolar disorder, I mean, it's quite likely that treatment might continue in the longer term. It's very unlikely to, if supposing the second episode of illness has come, let's say, the first episode, you might say 6 months, 1 year, you're going to try treatment. But the second episode has come, say 7 or 10 years after the first episode, the same idea of continuing for 1 year of medication might really be useful, because it takes anywhere between 3 and 12 weeks for the symptoms to totally be brought under control if there is a very clear diagnosis possible. But if there's episodes occurring more frequently, let's say every alternate year or so, then the likelihood of medicines continuing into the very long term is very high. Yeah, I think the repetitive talking, I understand, is quite a concern, but I think we have actually touched upon it. Maybe we can come back to it later if time permits. Yeah, it's coming. I know I've seen that in 3 questions now already, so we should probably have some discussion on this. My son gets angry over things I tell him not to do. He cries and pinches himself and others around. How can we tackle this? Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I think he's at least displaying his distress rather than aggression. So I think that's, it's at least it's towards himself and not to other people. Right. So I think this person can definitely be, gradually help to understand the limits. Okay. And you're going to, like I said, if there are things that you find are impossible to do, I mean, I think, or which are extremely dangerous, like maybe, jumping from great heights or something, you may actually have to set limitations and show them that's just not allowed. It has to be a very clear and very persistent, repeated communication. Maybe put all instructions around that way they can understand in every part of the house, and every single family member has to repeat that. But I think very often these actions are not that kind of life-threatening actions. Very often, if you think carefully, there'll be things that the person wants to explore and do. And I really think this is where my previous, what I said about trying to work with them and show them, help them explore many other activities, and also show them how certain activities can be harmful and so on, and by working with them and showing them that would be something very, very relevant here. I meant that in a very generic way. I mean that also here. But the broad principle that I would probably follow in this is to find out what those kind of activities are. And I'm sure there's only a very small list of activities which are just absolutely not allowed. And I think that is easier to manage. So the other activities, working with the child can to find out what he actually wants to do and giving him the time and space and observing him, interacting with him around that can be one way of actually understanding the child and maybe a beginning towards finding out newer things that you can actually direct his attention towards. And very often in the flow of life, and we are trying to do so many things in a day, and especially if the person has become now a youngster, the family has made peace with the difficulties that the person is going to have. Very often it may not be possible to actually give him the time and space. I really think if we can work around that, you might actually find that there are a lot of potential that we had not even appreciated in this person. I'm glad to see someone agree with me that his son's strength is cooking. Then there is a very optimistic person saying, how long does adolescence last? Okay, I mean, technically, if you want to know, I mean, it's almost the entire period of what you call teenage from 13 to 19. Okay, there is a big thought that in Indians, even without developmental disorders, adolescence in terms of becoming independent at the end of it, you know, and being able to manage things themselves and formulate their own chart in life and say, this is what I'm going to be doing, apparently doesn't happen till very late in life, and many don't even achieve that. So I think by and large, technically speaking, it's between 13 and 19 years of age, and it doesn't change just because a person has developmental disability, right? But and after 20, they are, I mean, it's kind of youth is allowed till 24, okay, and the young adult team can go up till 29 years of age also. But definitely that age as a marker is not going to suddenly make you feel that if you think that a particular, let's say, a person is being sexually disinhibited, it's an adolescent behavior he will learn when he's an adult. So by 19 years, if adolescent doesn't apply, he's just going to grow out of it. Unfortunately, sometimes that kind of outcomes may not happen. So you still need to work with things. But yes, technically speaking, adolescence ending at 19 would be probably a specific thing to keep in mind. If we know the strength of the child, is it still necessary to have some educational background certificate to allow him grow in that field, or are there some groups which will support? Yeah, what you're saying is, if say somebody is very good at creating some something with, he can work with nuts and bolts and actually create some equipments. Okay, but then you know that without a certificate, he's not going to get a job. I fully agree with you. I mean, the new education policy is claimed that it's going to get you past all these kind of challenges, but I'm not confident. So I think in this kind of situation, you need to demonstrate the skill of the person and actually work as groups to get support for organizations to take this particular activity. So in some way, he or she is going to start in a way that's probably not at the level at which a person with an educational background could probably start. And very often, somebody with that certificate might actually not know how to do a lot of manual kind of things, which I suspect you are referring to here, saying that the person has a special ability there. But yes, I mean, if as it stands today, without a specific certificate, you may not just launch him there. But definitely, if you work with organizations such as Vinyas and we all join together and work towards developing and shaping such organizations. So it's a kind of effort needed. We need to work with groups to actually build support for the abilities and say this person can be given the same job if he's doing the same task. Okay, it doesn't matter if he doesn't have the certificate. It will take some time before you can convince society that, but in small pockets for your own particular person, I'm sure if you work together with certain like groups such as Mitra or an organization that wants to work with you. So you will have to look for that support. Right now, you can't say he's good at doing this equipment. He's without an engineering degree, he's going to be allowed to just do this. It may not, unfortunately, happen as of today. It's very honest. I'm giving you my just honest opinion. I really wish I'm wrong and there are some easier ways of getting these certifications, but I would think you need to galvanize support for your child, your young adult child. Yeah, I think next is a very generic question, so I'll probably pass that. Okay, how do we work with multiple disabilities, Fragile X and autism? Maybe what I can say is, if we know a specific genetic basis for a developmental delay, and about 7 to 8% of persons with developmental delays, we may be able to find such a specific diagnosis. The key thing is to educate the family on what that means and what are the general outcomes for persons with that genetic variation, and help them actually get prepared for what is going to happen. many times families may not like to know if there are some adverse things associated with certain genetic diagnosis, and doctors feel uncomfortable about sharing all the details about saying person with this diagnosis may not live beyond 15, 20 years of age or something. I really think it's a disservice, because we need to help families get the best out of that person. For that, I mean, we may not, nobody is going to say he's going to die on such and such a day, but I think sharing the outcomes of what a genetic diagnosis means in great detail and exposing them to groups, because almost every single genetic diagnostic group tends to form some kind of an association, and there's a lot of information around many such specific syndromes. Helping families accept that and consciously work towards that will be something that I would probably favor, but it's a very generic question. I'll leave it there. What do these aggression control medicines do? Like they put children to sleep? Yeah. Major tranquilizers, by and large, are designed to put children to sleep, but the tolerance to the sedating effect of the medicine very often wears off. The calmness and the tranquilization that's achieved by the medicine tends to stay longer, right? So they don't. So there are medicines which are called hypnotics. Their only job is to make children, anybody who takes it, sleep. So sleep is the only target. Okay, but tranquilizers are actually designed to bring down aggression, bring more peace into the person, and its sedation is definitely a side effect of many major tranquilizers, but it can be minimized by it gets minimized over time because of tolerance coming to that property. The drug is no longer able to create sedation after some point of time, but will keep them calm. But also a lot can be achieved. So you want a child who is very disruptive, you know, we give you X dose of medication, he'll be extremely calm from 3 days from now. A lot of times it's very gratifying for doctors to achieve that target, and families are desperately looking at that because they tend to come for help only at that last minute when it's becoming impossible to manage. But I think if you can work with professionals and give them time, say about 3 months or so, and the medicines are built up at a very low dose, even the major tranquilizers, and gradually reach to a level, you'll find that you can hit an optimum level in such a way without actually making the child drowsy, but making sure the child is far more calm and peaceful. So making sleepy drowsy is not the major goal of aggression control medicine. That's really the summary answer. Yeah, the mild autism, 25-year-old, very high anxiety, which makes him very short-tempered. It's her, I think. Yeah, girl gets short-tempered. Yeah. See, I can't give you a simple answer. I mean, I'm sure if we understand that particular person, if the anxiety can be understood well, and we know the triggers for the anxiety, then putting a behavioral management plan, which can work over a 3 to 4 month period, okay, should definitely be possible if there are anxieties are particularly triggered by certain specific situations. Persons with autism take a little longer than people without any development delay diagnosis to coming to habituate to anxiety. So behavioral methods which are designed to make people actually habituate once when exposed to anxiety and gradually get used to it. It may need a few more months extra work with persons with autism because they take a longer. Yeah. But I would think that if a systematic 3 to 4 months of behavioral management has not helped bring down the anxiety, medication should not be seen as a difficult option at all. A lot of anxiety medicines exist which do not cause any amount of drowsiness. In fact, they may not help directly to sleep if by chance you give it in the nights actually. So definitely I wouldn't shy away from medications, but yes, it's definitely possible if we kind of spend 2-3 sessions just trying to understand the triggers for the anxiety, then we put in place a very systematic behavioral management program. So many times these are labor intensive and takes time and patience, and you need to work with the professionals and give them confidence that they're going to stick it out rather than rapidly getting disheartened by it, but it's definitely possible to do. Epilepsy in our children, will it continue lifelong? Yeah, I think in only about 5 to 10% of epilepsies is going to remain persistent. 70% of epilepsy gets controlled with one drug within 3 to 6 months of beginning the medication. And there in those kind of likelihood of coming off the medications at 5 years are very, very high. What happens is the persons with developmental delay, we are talking about a brain that's probably developed in a different sort of way. And the quiescence that we expect in persons without developmental delay when their epilepsy medicines have been used for some length of time may not get achieved so easily. So if a person without a developmental delay diagnosis, I would say that about 5% of them may have intractable seizures needing surgery and multiple medications and so on. That percentage will be in the region of 15 to 20% for a person with developmental delay. So there is a higher chance of them needing longer term medication option. But even then, I would say a vast majority over a 5 to 7 year period, persons with developmental delay, epilepsy can be sometimes, it can be seen as something that can be well managed, controlled and stopped, and you can declare them as having recovered from it. I'll skip the next question. Then it says I have a Down syndrome, she had seizures, so we're giving medicine from past 6 years. Same, I think the question that I just answered that I gave now applies to it. In long term, will she have problems if she takes it continuously? Now, I would like to respond to that part of the question. You know, we need to see, for example, I mean, antihypertensives, medicines taken for blood pressure, you know, high blood pressure, and over 20 years can induce a few other kind of difficulties in the person. We don't ask like that. We don't ask those questions. We say that this has to be controlled, otherwise, you know, it's seriously threatening for even life and limb. So we need to continue these medications. So sometimes we have to see what is the advantage we are getting by using the medicines today. I mean, we cannot only worry about a possible long-term adverse effect and not do anything now and put up with a whole lot of difficulty, and the person concerned also suffers in the process. So I think there is a need to kind of balance the advantages coming out from the medicine and looking at the long-term effects. Yes, some medicines, like for example, lithium and so on, can have certain longer-term effects, so need to be constantly monitored for. So if and anti-epileptics, there are many of them which are increasingly being, new drugs are being brought out with safety profile actually in mind. So I would think that having persistent epilepsy in a person with developmental delay can be so significantly leading to regression and taking away even the potentials that they've actually been given still. I mean, we may have to take a balanced action on whether we need to, we will make sure that it's controlled so he can live a much better life and become more cognitively capable and do better things, or would we be worrying about side effects? I really think it's an answer that each family has to take for themselves. Okay, but by and large, there are a lot of safe options available. I mean, that would be something that I would like to say. Yeah, starting medicines for attention and focus issues, a good idea. We are only concerned with side effects, so please advise. I totally agree with you, but most of the attention enhancing medicine, the commonest side effects are reduced appetite, and if taken in a slightly higher dose towards later part of the day, they may not sleep properly. These are the two major problems with attention enhancing medication. So these can both be worked around if we get the dosing right, and we kind of both the actual quantum of dose and also the timing of the use of medication, we can get it right. You also need to look at, you know, if not using medications, what are the challenges that are accruing to this child and how it is troublesome to the child. So by and large, attention enhancing medicines are not such, their adverse effects are such a big deal. Having said that, 4 to 5% of children may have a variety of side effects with each of the options available today in the market. You need to really discuss that with your doctors, but they are in the market because the benefits outweigh the risks associated with them. After longer conversation and a very careful, slow trial, you may also probably feel more convinced that it's actually, I mean, you're getting a lot of good out of the medication. I'll skip the self-talk question again because that's come up quite a few times. Yeah, I'll take the last one, which I expected to come. I mean, it's sexual urges and our available management methods. I mean, this is again, I would really urge you all to, I mean, I'm sure organizations like Mitra can arrange more information for you, but if you also get to read how Liliana Mayo's organization in Peru works on it, I mean, it'll be, the thing is, India is supposed to have signed up something called UNCRPD or something. I missed the point actually, but basically about saying we are taking care of the rights of the persons with developmental disabilities also. And, and we try to see that they cannot manage their sexual urges, and therefore they need to be controlled and kept away from that totally. And it can be so reinforcing if they get an opportunity. So they're going to recklessly try and create problems for themselves around and the family. So we should be controlling them. And by chance, if it's a girl and she gets pregnant and so on, these are absolutely worries that I can relate to in the families, right? But very often helping a person with things like how to practice masturbation and get relief from this, but do it in a private sort of way, like that other family who's already started teaching privacy and safety for an individual. Okay, I really think there is a whole lot of thinking through about, are we curbing the rights of a person with developmental disabilities on these aspects? Something to think about. We are a very what shall I say, we are, as a society, we tend to actually feel that it's our job to actually protect people with vulnerabilities, and which will often mean that we actually control and keep them away from all possible danger. And I think somewhere the answer to this will mean that we need to explore the boundaries of that kind of a culture and see if we can help people achieve some amount of sexual gratification without actually having to put themselves into dangerous situations. These are never going to find satisfactory solutions. Okay, and definitely since your second part of the question is our available management methods, we are not going to talk about how we can actually cause sterilization or hysterectomies and can we call vasectomies and so on. Now these kind of things are absolutely forbidden by law, so you can't really be doing it. Okay. Dr. Girimaji has left us, he's the professor at NIMANS, he's left us with the belief that given time and work with the families, and this is one of the things we hope that the people that we choose, we want to work with as project and the CARE, we would like to explore this and see how to actually educate them on what is allowed, what is not permitted in the society, and help them actually achieve their own ways of achieving some amount of sexual gratification without actually putting themselves at risk. It's a very difficult area. I don't think there are easy solutions, but we may need to break past the boundaries that we have set ourselves in the culture to say we should protect them and make sure they don't ever have exposure to this, because they're definitely going to wreck themselves. Now, once we become conscious of that, we will know that all our other methods are designed to control and safeguard them. Each family, I'm sure, is doing that in the best way possible. I don't think they are also very happy doing it, but I'm sure they have put. So ensuring safety of these vulnerable individuals is a great job for all carers, and which is one of the things that drains out families. But I think there may be no other solution to that possible. Having said that, I think there could be a vast number of people with developmental disabilities where we can actually explore and educate them on helping to find themselves even through the area of understanding their sexual identity and so on. And I know there's a wonderful work that happened in VHD Home Science Institute. I think I'm not getting her name now. She did a PhD there. She insists that helping children understand differences in gender and boundary limits and all, like a mother who's already written a note here, something that has to start from very early. Then it becomes easier to actually help them understand how to manage their sexual urges in a private sort of way and so on. So I think it's a complex topic, okay, and I would think it probably needs several sessions of discussions, and each family needs to find out their own position on that. Dr. Gifty, that's correct. Sumati, thank you very much for that. Yeah, certainly Dr. Gifty can be one person who can come and maybe talk to you all and share her experiences. I think she is in a happy pre-motherhood state right now, so I'm not sure she's going to come right away, but she'll come soon and talk to you and share her experiences with you. But she insists, when she did speak to us, she insists that teaching gender boundaries and teaching them to understand respect for other persons and so on. These are things, if we can teach them from younger age, then teaching them sex education becomes so much easier. Okay, so I think the current management methods are definitely not pharmacological or surgical. but it's a lot to do with education. And that education may presuppose a whole lot of additional things to have been learned before that education becomes successful. I think we may not have any more questions left there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable guidance and addressing the concerns of everyone very, very patiently. So we are all very grateful for that. Now, moving on, we have a special announcement to introduce your new program from Mitra for Life. So I will be handing over to Dr. Madhuri, who will be providing all of us with all details of the new program. Over to you, Dr. Madhuri.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashok. I made a lot of notes while you were talking. We, at Mitra, will take up a lot of the suggestions you had for us. One of the models we've always worked with is parents supporting each other in our groups, where we have, whether we're discussing sexuality or we're discussing adolescent issues, we always have parents share their experiences, what solutions they came up with and what worked for them with the other parents, so that the other parents benefit from it. And also for the parents of the younger children, we have also included them in our group, so that there's already a lot of learning that happens with the experience. I believe that a lot of the solutions come from within the parent community rather than therapists, professionals, counselors. So that's what we've tried to facilitate. Without taking too much time, let me quickly jump into this. Just give me a moment to share my screen. So one of the things at Mitra for Life we have always tried to do is we've tried to have programs around inclusion for youngsters with autism special needs. This was a program that came up after the lockdown happened, after COVID. So we've run a pilot project on this. We ran about 12 sessions online. This was a group meet for youngsters age 16 plus. We had interactions with young college volunteers for them. And the activities typically, the aim of this program was not education or skill building. It was mainly to socialize and to give them an opportunity to socialize and make friends. Of course, in a non-COVID scenario, we were planning to take this on the ground and actually have weekend meets. But as of now, this is happening online. And the activities that these young college volunteers do with a small group of five to six special needs youngsters, it's all centered around music or theater. It could be dance. And in fact, as Dr. Ashok suggested, we have done fireless cooking, simple things that a youngster can learn and pick up. And the feedback has been very encouraging from the parents. So we are now opening this up to the next 12 youngsters. We have two groups. We have college youngsters from Christ College who are volunteers, and they'll be handling the entire interaction. So please do sign up for your youngster, for your child. And you can get in touch with either the group, or you can go to mitraforlife.org for more details. And yes, and again, Dr. Ashok, thank you so much. We'd really love to continue the discussion with you and see if we can provide any sort of support information, anything to CareAd and be of use to your project. Thank you so much. Back to Dr. Sami. Back to Mrs. Sami.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. It is my pleasure and privilege to thank Dr. Ashok for his valuable guidance given to all our dear parents. Thank you, Doctor, for having accepted our invitation despite your busy schedule. Now, it was actually early in terms of early intervention, what should be focused on, and how bonding helps, community residence, all your topics. I'm sure it had benefited all our dear parents. And this program has benefited all participants, I'm sure. I thank all parents for joining us today. So hope to see you all in our next session too. And Doctor, I want to thank you very much. And we would be very, very excited and look forward to working together, as you mentioned, And that would really, give us a lot of boost in terms of Mitra for Life activities. Thank you very much, sir. And thanking all the dear parents for joining us today. Thank you very much. And we hope to see you in the next session too with yet another program. Thank you, everyone.